safe for me to be here? Is it safe to have my family here? And it was a valid concern. So what the Navy did was they initiated a study. It's called the Naples Public Health Evaluation to determine whether or not there were any risks to the people who lived here. Now, this was a voluntary study. Nobody mandated that we do it. And I'll be very honest with you, it's the only comprehensive health study that has been done for this region by anybody, and it was done by the United States Navy. The study cost about $35 million, and it lasted a year and a half, almost a year and a half. And then the analysis and the data and the writing of the reports and everything took even more time. And that doesn't account for the sunk cost of the man hours and the salaries of the people and everything. So, you know, I don't know what in the end this thing cost, but it was probably double that. So it was a very extensive study. What did they look at in this study? They looked at air quality, and they sampled it over the course of an entire year. So throughout the course of a month, they would take samples each month for a year. We looked at soil pollution. We looked at soil gas, because, you know, if you dump illegal chemicals in the soil, eventually what will happen is they'll vaporize, and they could, you know, come up out of the ground in the form of fumes into your house, and if they reach certain levels, they can be unhealthy. And then, so let's see, soil, what else is one of them? Oh, water, of course. And water. So we looked at city water, and we looked at well water, we looked at, you know, they looked at everything. Okay, so this study was very comprehensive. The initial phases of the study, the Navy went out and they tested hundreds of homes, because at that time there were people living all over the region. So they went out and they started taking samples of all the homes where our people lived. They brought them back in and they analyzed them and they tested for all of those things. And what they found was, they found that some people's houses had high elevated risks. Some had wells that were contaminated. Others had soil gas that was getting into their house that was unhealthy. Some of them had both. So they looked very comprehensively at that. And so what they did was they started testing all these houses, and they started putting dots on the map where all these houses were, right? So through the course of this, they identified all these places, and then they went back and analyzed it, and they grouped them into areas, which later became what we now call new lease suspension zones, which means you can't live in those zones. We wouldn't, after that point, we would not rent homes to people in those areas. So in June 2011, the entire report came out, and here's the bottom line for the report. What it said was this: for all of those things that we analyzed, and for all of those protections that we put in place, the risk of living in the Campania region is no greater than it is living in any like-size, comparable size city in the United States. Okay? So if you don't let your people live in these areas, if you give them bottled water, if you, adhere to all these provisions that we put in place, there's no greater risk here than there is any other like-size American city.